A lighthouse at the edge of time. This lighthouse stood at the edge of the earth, gloomy and majestic, as if frozen in anticipation of its next victim. Its light was once a reliable guide for sailors, saving them from death on sharp rocks. But one fateful storm more than 100 years ago cut short this story. On that stormy night, the light of the lighthouse went out, and in the morning the raging waves washed ashore only the wreckage of ships and the bodies of sailors. No one survived. Since then, the place has been deserted, and this death has been frozen in the air. People whispered, "The lighthouse is cursed." There were rumors that on that fateful night, time stopped inside it, and anyone who entered would be lost forever. I always considered these legends stupid horror stories, at least until recently. A month ago, Tom, my younger brother, began talking obsessively about the lighthouse. "The answer is there," he kept saying, as if he were immersed in some secret of his own. I told him to leave it at that, but Tom wouldn't listen. A week ago, he disappeared. The police assured me that he had simply run away. Teenagers sometimes do that, but I knew better. In his room, I found an old rusty key and a notebook. On each page was one short but alarming phrase: "Everything will become clear if you wind the clock." I took the key and went there, to that very lighthouse. I needed to find it, to find out what had happened. But was I sincerely ready for the secrets that would be revealed? A thick fog hung over the ground, as if protecting the lighthouse from intruders. The dilapidated building towered in the darkness, its silhouette lost in the night. The lighthouse door was massive, peeling with age, as if no one had touched it for decades. However, the key fit perfectly. When I turned it, a creak broke the silence, and the door gave way. It was deathly cold inside. The empty room beneath my feet was covered in a layer of dust, and the smell of rot hung in the air. My breath echoed in the deathly silence, but my gaze was drawn to the massive clock in the center of the room. Its golden face emitted an ominous glow, and its hands were frozen at midnight. I came closer. The cold mechanisms seemed to breathe heavily, alive and frightening. As soon as my fingers touched the dial, the world around me froze. What was stranger was that the first moment seemed normal to me. However, when I stepped outside, I realized that everything had begun to repeat itself. A bird flew off a branch at exactly the same moment, and the waves hit the rocks with an alarming rhythm, repeating themselves. I went back inside. It was different now. The midnight silence was broken by whispers, heavy footsteps, and then I saw him. Tom. He was standing by the clock, his back to me. "Tom." I broke the eerie silence that surrounded me. He turned slowly, and a cold sweat broke out on my skin. There was no life in his eyes. He looked human, but something was incredibly wrong. "Wind the clock," he said quietly, his voice echoing like a thunderclap. As I tried to approach Tom and the clock, the mechanism sped up. The ticking became deafening. Suddenly, I felt an incredible heaviness, as if time itself was trying to trap me. The lighthouse began to spin before my eyes, and I found myself at his door again. The bird, the same wave, Tom's steps. Everything was repeated down to the smallest detail. I tried asking questions again, but Tom only repeated, "Wind the clock." Every attempt to escape resulted in the same thing. I was back at the beginning. With each new cycle, Tom's eyes became more and more empty, and I began to feel myself losing touch with reality. Whispers were replaced by ominous screams. Silhouettes began to flicker inside the room, but they disappeared every time I paid attention to them. The lighthouse became my constant nightmare. Days turned into months. Or were they years? I couldn't tell. I tried to wind the watch, but each time the mechanism burned up in my hands. The fire quickly burned my fingers, leaving traces of pain. Tom, or whatever he had become, stood motionless, not blinking, not breathing. The only thing that never changed was the ticking of the clock. It haunted me even when nothing was happening. It was like a call in the dark, making me shudder at the thought of what would happen if the mechanism was finally wound up. I understand that my entire reality has become a cycle, and the only way out is probably this damned watch. Winding it up is the only chance to break the trap. But at the same time, fear is eating away at me from the inside. What if something breaks not only in the watch, but in the world? Tom doesn't say anything else. He just stands there, watching me, watching what I'm becoming. I'm writing this message as a warning. If you find these notes, do not enter the lighthouse. If you hear the clock ticking, run. It's too late.